Welcome back to the Sports Biz Report. Kevin Rossi, joined by Mike Proska. We'll be talking quickly about the protests in Brazil, then a little bit about Andy Murray's win at Wimbledon, and the beginnings of NBA free agency, which is always a fun time. So first, right into the Brazil protests. Got really interested in this personally because I like the connection between sports and politics. Dave Zirin is one of my favorite writers, and he's been covering it pretty extensively for The Nation. And one of the SMTSU officers, Kevis Pinto, is a Brazilian and actually living in Brazil for co-op right now. And so I got a bit of a first-hand experience with the protests. Just wanted to share a couple of the things that he said. So the protests began at the beginning of June, with the tipping point being the raise in the bus fare, with the World Cup and the Olympics coming in 2014-2016, which is interesting for a country like Brazil. It hasn't happened since the U.S. hosted the World Cup and then the Atlanta Olympics in 94 and then 96. So Brazil's government is historically ravaged by corruption, and the people can't really take it any further in the first place. So this was kind of the end for them. Massive protests in all the major cities across the country, and a lot of distorted media. So in Kevis's email, he was talking about some of the police brutality, and these protests were supposed to be nonviolent, and there are actually reports that police were dressing in street clothes and joining in the other side of the protest to then start violence so that the police could turn on the crowd, which, if you really think about it, that's pretty incredible. You have people camping outside the governor's house, asking him to resign. The Confederations Cup just ended at the end of June, and the president of the country, Rousseff, did not even attend the final match, which featured the home country Brazil, because she got booed so bad in the first round, and they were scared of what might happen if she showed up again. So, not to shamelessly self-promote, but I'll have an article out in the Triangle this week, kind of running through in as much detail as possible in a short newspaper column, just kind of what's going on, with some more quotes from Kevis. And it's some pretty incredible stuff. But anyway, past the boring part. Andy Murray with a huge win at Wimbledon. Being American, you can't even really feel the depth of that victory, being the first Brit in 77 years since Fred Perry in 1936 to win Wimbledon. Many Brits have tried. Henman, I remember him being good, but obviously he never won. It was pretty incredible just to watch.
It really was. I think as a fan of American tennis, we're already so frustrated we haven't seen an American win the U.S. Open since 2003. So that's 10 years when Andy Roddick won. Imagine 77 years waiting for that moment. It was something really special to watch down on center court at Wimbledon.
Absolutely. And Roddick was actually the last player to win a major in his home country with the U.S. Open win.
Now that you said it, yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. I saw that during the telecast on ESPN.
Well, yeah, because Leighton Hewitt, he's getting old now for Australia.
Right.
Nadal just owns the French.
Yeah, I guess that's what happens when there's no majors in Serbia or Switzerland or Spain.
Yeah, that's true.
So, Murray finally brings it home, and aside from, the historic victory, which there's plenty of great sports writing out there on the interwebs about Murray's win that I highly recommend, but he also brought home quite a healthy paycheck, 1.6 million pounds, which is about $2.4 million. So
that's, I'd take it in a heartbeat. That's all I have to say about that. I know the players, they actually just got done negotiating with the U.S. Open also for raising the prize money. So it's something they're really focused on, it seems.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of interesting because tennis doesn't always get the greatest ratings, but their prize money, it's the winner of the U.S. Open of golf got about $1.5 million, and that's what the runner-up got at Wimbledon. So even despite the ratings, they're obviously bringing in plenty of cash to pay their players.
I mean, those who follow tennis, they're pretty into it, and I think that's where their big fan base really lies.
Right. And I guess we all wish we could bring home a nice $2.4 million check every once in a while.
That would make life a lot easier.
Yeah, you would think so. And also interesting with the prize money is that tennis, actually, they pay equal prize money for their men and their women. So Marion Bartoli, the French woman who won the women's side of the Wimbledon draw, will also brought home $2.4 million. So I think that's really interesting that they go with an actual 50-50 split.
I never knew that until you just said that. And I also find it interesting that we haven't heard more of that, especially with all the talk in sports about equality between men and women. I'm surprised that we don't hear more about that.
Right. And I also think, because I think the closest thing to look to this kind of pay equity would be in golf, because it's a similar kind of structure in individual sport. But also, golf doesn't, the men will play at Marion for the U.S. Open, but the women don't play at Marion. Yeah. It's not, and the U.S. Opens for both men and ladies, don't occur at the same time like they do in tennis, so it's a unique pay structure for, a unique
sport. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, so Murray now among the royalty. And speaking of Murrays, Kevin Murray, the treasurer, is actually over in London now and got a chance to see Wimbledon firsthand. So hopefully we'll get him on here one day and he can talk about that. Judging by his Instagram and Facebook, it doesn't even look like he's going to class. He's having a bit of fun over there.
He is having his fun. Another thing about Wimbledon, though, this year a lot of players had retired early. And for me, it just begs the question, is there enough time in between the French Open and Wimbledon for the players to get ready, to recover from the clay court season and change surfaces? Is that a factor? Do you think that plays a role in that?
Right. That's definitely something to look at, because I've never played tennis, but they're completely different. Well, I've attempted to play tennis. Sorry, not well. They're completely different surfaces. The grass plays a lot faster. It's about a month between, and I don't know. You're talking about a sport that it takes a lot to recover from, and especially when you're changing surfaces on top of it.
When you look at all the other major Grand Slams, the distance between the French Open and Wimbledon is the shortest. So it's just something I think we might hear the players complain about in the future. Maybe something will happen with that.
Yeah. I feel like Djokovic would be the most vocal one on that one. He seemed to really, even though obviously he made it to the finals, he was on the ground a lot of the time, slipping and sliding out there. I know Murray had a bad one at the very beginning of the final. It kind of hurt his hip there. It was actually really awkward looking. I'm surprised he wasn't more hurt by it. But yeah, maybe that's something that they can.
I think it's something to definitely keep our eye on in the next year or two to come.
Absolutely. So, enough tennis. I know not everybody's a tennis fan out there, which you're really missing out on a golden age of tennis right now. So on to the NBA and their free agency period. I feel like we were just talking about the NBA finals, but I guess it never ends these days. The four major sports are just year-round enterprises. So obviously, NBA free agency, gotta talk Dwight Howard.
Dwight Howard's the first name that pops into everyone's mind.
For better or worse.
That's it. So he's with the Rockets.
Yeah, quite a fit, joining up with superstar James Harden now. He's out of the media spotlight of LA. He's the main guy, but he's also got his sidekick.
I think it's a good move for both Detroit and the Rockets. He is out of the media spotlight, but then again, the media will probably follow him wherever he goes. But I think having a younger star with him, like James Harden, instead of like a Kobe who's sort of coming out of his prime, I think that's going to help him.
Right. Yeah, I really think that because you saw how the media followed him in Orlando, and Orlando's not the biggest media market either, but he was the number one guy. So he was near the end. He was made into a villain, but he got away with a lot beforehand. We'll see how his antics turn in Houston. Although I read something earlier in the week. I forget exactly who it was by, but is talking about how this is the first situation that Dwight Howard does not completely control, because he went to the Rockets, but they're also not going to stand for it. It's his third team in 3 years. It's well documented, his issues on and off the court. Like, he knows who the coach is going to be. He knows who's going to be around him. He really has no room to complain here. He knows the situation he's going to, and we'll see. We'll see how long it takes for a media report.
I think that'll play a major part. He knows what he has to do, and I think it's just really his success is going to come down to his mindset. That's what I believe. He's got talent with him. He's got talent himself. He's just got to focus and do what he has to get done.
Right, and even the Rockets in general, the past couple of seasons, I think they've been a very underrated team to watch, especially with Harden last year. They have some young talent that they're close, and maybe Dwight Howard is that piece that puts him over the top. If he can get back to his dominant Orlando days,
they're definitely top
they're
five
a dangerous team.
Definitely.
And you saw an aging Spurs team be able to reach the NBA Finals. So the West is pretty open. We'll see what Westbrook, how he comes back in Oklahoma City, but how interesting would it be to see like Oklahoma City and Houston?
Oh, that would make for a great series. Then you also got the Lakers, who they got Chris Kaman to replace Howard. He's no Dwight Howard, but he could fill in pretty well. I think
he's a quietly serviceable veteran.
Something to look for.
Right. And perhaps one of the most quietly intriguing stories in the NBA offseason headlines is that new team down in New Orleans, the Pelicans, which there seems to be no good way to shorten Pelicans. I saw it written Pelly in a column today, and it didn't work. But just signed Tyreke Evans to a pretty large contract, 4 years, $44 million, I believe, and got Drew Holiday in a trade from Philadelphia in exchange for Nerlens Noel and a first-round pick. So, they have some scoring power on their team.
They might have just had the best offseason so far out of any team in the NBA. They needed a point guard going into this offseason. I believe they were looking at Trey Burke in the draft, but then when Noel fell to number 6, they turned that into 23-year-old Drew Holiday, already been an all-star. You can't really ask for much more.
Right. And, pair that all with Eric Gordon, Anthony Davis, and Austin Rivers.
Now Tyreke.
Right, who's all already there. And, I think that they could, if you're being picky, they could add a veteran big man in the middle to pair with Davis. Because, Davis, he didn't have a full season last year because of the injury at the beginning of the year. But they're an interesting team to watch. We'll see what they do in the future, because they have taken on some salary with Holiday and now the massive contract with Tyreke. So they're kind of a team in rebuilding that is not very interested in taking too long to rebuild.
Exactly. I think maybe behind the scenes a little bit, having all these young stars, players that are really fun to watch, can really help build the brand that they're trying to establish also.
Right, and they're going to need a lot of young stars to make the Pelicans sound good.
Yeah, they are.
All right, so that's it for our talk on NBA free agency. There's a lot going on, a lot of signings. Nets are interesting.
The Nets are very interesting.
Pierce said that he might play for 10 more years, which
I don't think that's happening.
I guess they'll be lucky if they can get 2 or 3 out of him. So,
will Brandon Jennings ever sign with anyone?
Yeah, he's a very polarizing player, and I can imagine why you wouldn't want to spend the money straight out on him. But it's the NBA. Yeah. Some team will throw some stupid offer out there.
You see the Cavs are interested in buying him now.
Yeah, so I saw 2 years, $24 million. That's nuts.
Why?
I guess they liked his antics in Philadelphia. Yeah. I mean, if anything, he was fun to cover.
He looked good on the bench.
Yeah, always changing hairstyle. It brings some value to the franchise. But yeah, keep an ear to the internet. Maybe I'm sure there'll be news coming out every day about somebody signing. So with the Brazil protests, Wimbledon, and NBA free agency, we'll leave you guys there. Lots to digest this week. And we'll be back next week with Professor, or should I say Dr. Brett Burchett. And he's going to give a little career development interview about what it's like to go for your doctorate, that whole process, because it's completely unique to obviously the undergrad process that we're going through now. So for Proska, I'm Rossi, and follow us on Twitter at Drexel SMTSU.